how many of you have gone to a conference or have had inspiration hit you, had had the feeling, I want to do A, B, and C, and you're totally excited, and then the next day you go right back to 1, 2, 3 in your regular old life? Anybody? Everybody. Inspiration is it's a real energy. It's a real feeling. But the problem is that inspiration is not as powerful as the force of gravity that holds your life in place. So what is gravity?
I have to read all those emails when I get back to work.
Busyness. Yeah, busyness is a big one in today's world. That's
Energy.
another.
Energy.
You're out of energy or you have too much energy?
Both.
Lack of energy.
Depends on the day.
Yeah. What's another?
Not having a specific plan.
Not having a plan. What
Like
else?
You can have all these great ideas, but
Yeah.
if you don't know where to start,
Yeah,
you'll never get on
that's-
the right road.
Yeah, it's a great one. Not having a plan. What else?
Fear.
Fear. Fear of,
Not being perfect or,
yeah, maybe fear of not being able to achieve it.
yeah,
Maybe there's fear of achieving it.
It's a challenge. It's easier not to sometimes.
It's hard.
Yeah.
Yes, change is hard. All of these are forces of gravity, is the way I describe them, that is more powerful than the force of inspiration that you felt. And so the inspiration is just a little whiff of energy, and the gravity is this huge pull, and you just go right back to what you were doing. It's easier. And I realized something that I call the Michael Jordan effect. Anybody remember Michael Jordan used to play basketball? You know, flying through the air, ready to dunk, but he's still up there, he's hanging up there, he's hanging up there. He seems to defy the force of gravity. But he had the same gravity every other basketball player had, but he was more powerful. So it looked like he defied gravity. And what I recognized is that in this process that we're going to talk about, you don't have to worry about your gravity. You don't have to focus on your gravity. My big gravity is worry. I don't need to worry about my worry. What inspires you? We're going to be pumped up, right, by the time we get out of here on Sunday. But everybody's not going to be inspired by the same things. But pay attention to what inspires you and write it down. Capture it. Don't forget it. And don't filter it out. Something inspires you, you feel it, write it down. Second question is, why is it important to me? That takes a little bit more reflection. Don't worry about that second question while you're here. Just focus on the first. The third question is, how will I bring it into my life? And when you answer those questions, the first one's easy, you're just paying attention. When you get into the second and the third, you're starting to do the hard work. And in doing that, you invoke three big powers that all of us have that will far overcome the gravity that's holding your life in place. We can't do everything. You're going to be inspired by lots and lots of things, not only this weekend, but in your life in general. And you have to choose those things that are most important to you. That's important. And you also have to choose those things that are not important enough and get the hell rid of them. You can't afford time with them. And you also have to look at your life as it exists today, and the things that you're doing today that may have been important at some point but are no longer important, get rid of those too. Clear your life up. Our friend, is it Clint? How good does it feel when you get rid of stuff that you don't need?
Awesome.
Awesome. So that's the power, that's the first power, the power of priority. It's very important. And when you're doing something that you love, something that's really important to you, you're invoking the power of the heart. And that's the second power. And so I made room for my inspiration in my life. And I prioritized it. I put it in front of the line. And I said, I'm just going to keep doing it until I get there. And what happens when you ask those questions and when you start doing the work of bringing your inspiration into your life, you invoke the power of the universe. This is a cool power. This is the power of serendipity. This is the power that once you start down the path, first of all, you see the world differently. And I started seeing the world like an author. I was an author. hadn't written a book yet, but I had decided to be an author. You see the world different. And then also, things happen that you could never have imagined happening because you've started on this journey.
So my alarm clock went off at 4:45 in the morning in the Olympic Village. I opened my eyes. The first thought that came to mind was 10:17 a.m. That was our scheduled start time to make our doubles canoe run at the 1992 Olympics. And I woke up just so clear, knowing what we had to do. This was 25 years ago this year, and today, I can still remember every little thing that we did from 4:45 in the morning going forward. That included things like the amount of time we would take for stretching, the amount of time we would take to eat, what we were going to eat. It included time to do more stretching, and then the time it took to walk over to where the team masseuse was living and do our warm-up massage. It included the time, this was not, the Olympics were in Barcelona, the whitewater canoeing events were in a small town 2 hours north of Barcelona in a town called La Seu d'Urgell. We didn't need buses to walk. We could walk from the Olympic Village to the Olympic whitewater canoe slalom race course. It included the time to walk from the village to the race course. It included that time to go through security and put our bags and get into the venue. And then in whitewater canoeing, it's not just getting ready to paddle, but in our sport, you actually walk the river and you look at the rapids, you look at how the water is flowing, you're looking at the gates, the poles that are hung from wires above the river that you're going to be maneuvering your canoe through the rapids between the poles to do what you came to the Olympics to do, which is to do the very best that you could do. It included time to do our first warm-up on the flat water section above the race course, because you're not allowed to practice on the race course on the day of the event. The only time you get to paddle is when your race run starts. It included that time to come back off the water, meet with our coaches, visualize our course for the umpteenth time that day. It included more time to then walk the course again, come back to our boat, and do one more little warm-up before it was time to go. And roughly at about 10:15 in the morning, my partner and I get out of our boat, we pack up our bags, and we walk back to the Olympic Village. Our race run was not until the next day. I kid you not, our coaches, as we rehearsed our race strategy minute to minute the day before the race, our coaches were constantly reminding us, you guys know you're not racing today. Yeah, we know we're not racing today. But the level of detail of what we did to get ready to put the boat on the start line was crystal clear. And we went back to the Olympic Village and we watched the rest of the athletes who were racing on August 1st do their competition, and we kicked back and relaxed for the rest of the day and got ready to do our actual race run the next day, in which we would wake up at 4:45 in the morning and repeat the exact same process that we had done the day before, and a process that we had rehearsed for 4 years. Back in our training in North Carolina, our training in Washington, D.C. The reason I tell you this, to this day, I remember everything going up onto the start line like it was yesterday. I gotta tell you, I can remember almost nothing that happened after we crossed the finish line. This is one of my big themes in life. Start lines over finish lines. And as a culture, we are taught to think about finish lines all the time. And everything that Matt just talked about too, the what's and the whys, I believe those things. They're finish lines, but I trust the finish lines. I gotta tell you, the most sacred space in the world that I've personally ever experienced has been to sit in the start gate at the Olympic Games. So in our sport, one canoe gets to go down the river at a time. It's like a ski race. So you have a scheduled start time of 10:17 in the morning. That means at 10:16, when the boat in front of you leaves, you get to go into the gate and you get to enjoy that space, the sacred space of the start. And everything is stripped away. You are naked in the start. The bravado is gone. The confidence is gone. It will do you no good to think about the color of the medal that you want to win. All you have are the attributes that you have, that you've trained for in that moment. To put your mind anywhere else except in the dirt, in the present moment, and to call on the attributes that you have in that moment would be energy going elsewhere. So the idea is to be as present as you can in that start line. It will do you no good to think about the color of the medal that you want to win. That was before, this is now, and that's the value of a start line. And I think relative to the conversation that we're having today about turning inspiration into action is that this big idea to me that the more that you can put yourself on the start line and the way that you set the level of details so that you start each day well, that will set the conditions for performing well. And over the next few minutes, I'm going to tell a few stories and talk a little bit about my what, why, and how. But I'm going to refer to sort of two experiences. One, I'm going to talk a little bit more about how this happened, the idea of being an athlete and how you get better and how we worked at it. And then also, later in my life, after my career in sport, I had the opportunity to be the chief executive officer of USA Canoe Kayak, which is the national governing body for competitive canoeing and kayaking in the United States, underneath the umbrella of the U.S. Olympic Committee. And I learned a lot in that as well, and there is a correlation between the two. But I'm going to start off by saying that this year is my 40th year in the sport of whitewater canoeing on some level. And I still paddle today. I'm still active in the sport. I don't work in the sport anymore. I am a dad of a 16-year-old who's very active in the sport. And that's it, but I still paddle. And those lessons, those ideas that I've learned navigating whitewater rivers shape everything I believe about the question of how, right? I'm going to assume that if we're here in this room, there's already some good work happening on the what and the why. And that's not to assume that you're not doing the how well. I'm just going to share a little bit about my how. That's what I obsess about. That's what I love, is the how part. How to kind of get stuff moving again. How to go from the clouds and get down in the dirt and start making things happen. So I'm going to take you back to the beginning, my beginning in the sport of canoeing. I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area, born and raised on the Potomac River. And I think you could look at the United States today and you have a hard time making a case that being born in the Washington, D.C. area is an advantage. But I can tell you in the sport of whitewater canoeing, it was a big advantage. If you think about where most of the good whitewater in the United States is located, you think of places like Colorado, you think of places like western North Carolina or southeastern Tennessee or northern California or even down over here in Hood River, Oregon, places where there's elevation. And typically elevation means a rural area. But the Washington, D.C. area has the Potomac River flowing right through town. And there is some unbelievably good whitewater happening there. And so about the time that I was 12, 13 years old, in early 1980s, the sport was not on the Olympic program. And so, but it had a world championships. And that means that was the way the athletes kind of competed to be the best. Your highest aspiration was to be a world champion, not an Olympic champion. And I was lucky. I mean, this was sort of my own Malcolm Gladwell outlier moment, was being born and raised in this area, because the group that kind of pulled me in when I was 12 years old was the highest performing group in the history of our sport. These were American athletes that were just dominating the world of canoe slalom. And it had the great athletes and it had the legendary coach. I kind of tell people it was like being 12, 13 years old. as a basketball player and literally getting to go play with Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Russell Westbrook, and being coached by Phil Jackson. Like, that's how I started. And you might think that that was an advantage, but I was not an athletic kid when I was 13 years old. I didn't look like an athlete. I wasn't the fittest person in the world, but I liked showing up. Like, if you asked me what the what was, I liked the people. To this day, I think whitewater canoeing is a nice activity to do. It has all that adventure and risk and all the, it's cool. I get it. I still like to do it. But it was the people. So one of the things I actually figured out, it's a really hard, complex activity to learn. I liked the people that I did it with. And so my why was really, I wanted to get better and learn so that I could enjoy my time with these other athletes a little bit more. Because in the beginning, when we first started, we competed like crazy against each other in practice. That's what made this culture of excellence in the Washington, D.C. area so good. We just demolished each other in practice. I mean, we would routinely finish international races and feel like the intensity of a world championship or a World Cup race didn't quite meet the intensity of a practice session on the Potomac River. And I didn't like getting my butt kicked, every day when I was 12 years old. I wanted to get a little bit better because getting better meant I got closer to my competitors as friends, as people, as a team, as innovators. That was really important to me. And so one of the things that happens is that to paddle a canoe fast, it's not about just paddling harder. It became very clear that, we think of these things, these big things that we want to accomplish. It doesn't matter whether it's writing a book or starting a business or a nonprofit or wanting to win an Olympic gold medal. It is about creating the capacity to do that. And usually those are more conditional philosophical things, not just the tactical parts of doing it. We obsess about the tactics. So what I mean by that, yes, there's a lot of different kinds of conditioning and technique-specific workouts you can do, but there's a whole lot of stretching, there's a whole lot of getting your body and mind ready, there's a whole lot that goes into what you eat and how you kind of get ready in your head, how you rest, how you sleep, how you design the equipment that you want to use that you think are going to help you be better in the boat. These are all conditions that actually improve your chances, that bring the capacity to actually perform your best and actually begin to take action. And I mentioned, I kind of want to jump ahead a little bit to my chief executive officer days running USA Canoe Kayak and how this really kind of came out in a more typical work career environment. I cared about the product. I knew what the what was. Wanted our athletes to win gold medals, have the opportunity like my canoe partner and I had. And the why was because it's pretty fun helping people do their best. And I really got screwed up in the how when I was the chief executive officer of USA Canoe Kayak. My gravity, so to speak, my resistance, the things that were holding me back, or the biggest thing was I stopped taking care of myself. Always about taking care of other people. I completely turned my attention away from my own capacity. I obsessed about what would it take to help the others, but I didn't put myself in a position to really be my best and really bring my best performance to the table. I shortchanged on the how. And the way that eventually fixed, it got, working in a desk job and trying to get the money that the athletes need and get the support for them and to draw the high performance plans and to supervise the coaches and to supervise what the teams need. And we had so much going on. And my health was just plummeting as we were doing this. And it was like a big spiral. It just started with, from the way I slept poorly and made bad choices and the way I would put myself down at night, and then, I would not sleep well in the middle of the night and get stressed out about what wasn't working. I was exhausted when I woke up. Something just had to change. And I started just very small. When I finally figured out, it was either if I was going to stay in this job, like something had to give. And so at the time, we were headquartered in Oklahoma City at the Oklahoma City Boathouse District, this very futuristic canoe kayak training center right in downtown Oklahoma City. And they had an employee wellness program at the Boathouse District. And during my lunch hour, I started to work out. So I had put on a lot of weight. You know, when I started to coach, I mentioned that I stopped taking care of myself. And so the goal wasn't like to lose weight. I was just trying to break a pattern that I knew wasn't working for me. And so I figured that by maybe working out during the lunch hour, that not only would I get a little exercise and movement and play and spend time with my friends, I would also maybe stop relying on the Chinese food buffet and the pizza bar and not putting that kind of food into my system. And slowly, very slowly, everything that kind of began to happen next, and I just cannot emphasize the word slow enough, I noticed small changes. I just started to feel a little bit better. And I started to ask myself, like, what else could I do? What else might work? Like, that became the magic question. Like, what else could I do? What else might work? And I slowly started to develop a routine, a practice, that started. And I focused a lot on sleep first, because I knew I just couldn't function without resting properly. A lot of what I do is I try to take what I'm learning from all these elite athlete programs and drawing high performance plans for elite athletes and saying, how can I transfer these to just like the regular person? I started to just run these experiments and start to feel better. And slowly, just the momentum began to build. And you know what? So where I get with all this eventually developed into, for me, a morning practice, a daily practice that now usually takes me about an hour to sort of get through in the morning. And it's something that I do every day. And I've been doing it for almost 4 years now. And I don't miss a day. I don't take a day off from it. But when I talk about setting the conditions for what you want to do and really coming out of a conference like this and going home and taking the ideas that you're paying attention to and trusting that you don't have to focus on winning your gold medal. Trust the fact that it's there. You don't have to think about it all the time. Get present again and put yourself in a position to activate the skills, the attributes, the experiences, the talents you have today and execute on those every day. For me, that looks like a little bit of journaling. I do that, and that's something that comes from my athletic background. I kept a training log from the time I was 12 years old. That very first workout on the Potomac River, the best guy said, keep a training log. Okay, I'll do that. How do you do that? The one thing I wish I had done in my own training log was to answer that question every night before I went to sleep. Who did I serve? Only because I don't want that question to be blank. Fine. I mean, you talk about the pyramid that exists in this book, and you kind of get into that point of significance. That's where that who did I serve question just been doing this every day for years now. There's no real benefit to doing it one time. But the idea of doing this every day, and it's not a streak anymore. It's like oxygen for me. For 5 minutes, I can at least get up, drink a glass of water, and answer those 3 morning questions in a journal. If I have to get up at 3:30 for a flight that leaves at 6, who cares if I get up at 3:25 instead of 3:30 to get that process started? To begin that process of self-investment, to begin that process of waking up for yourself, not for something else or not for someone else. And I think as you begin to take care of yourself and give yourself the capacity to do things, I think the ability to give yourself the force to start moving the gravity. It's one of my favorite lines in this book about the gravity. The only thing that will move something, a book, if you want that book to move, is a force greater than the gravity. And if you give yourself day to day, you take care of yourself, and you give yourself that capacity, that is when you create the force to begin to do the things that are most important to you. I feel like that works for me well in my life today because I take care of myself in the first few minutes in the morning. In the process of trying to get myself better, this, what we're talking about, actually became more important to me than sticking around being the CEO of USA Canoe Kayak and trying to help athletes. I wanted to take this and be in a position to share this with more people. And I left my job. I left my dream job. I left the only paycheck job I've ever had. I haven't had many. I was the CEO of USA Canoe Kayak for 5 years. And doing this process was able to kind of overcome those forces of gravity and generate enough force for myself to move the job over and be able to be here in an event like this, sharing my story with you.
For me, so that's a great part about working with Matt, inspiration and action. He has inspirations, he acts on it. Some work, some don't. But he actually kicks them out there into the world, and he'll just send me stuff. Like, hey, what if we'll do a play, like I have a book that I published through Happy Living. It was based on my play. Like, hey, let's do a performance, and everyone, part of their ticket gets a book. Like, can we do theater and books together? Can we not do a book signing at a bookstore? Let's do it in a theater. Let's have cocktails and do a book signing. Let's not keep doing the same thing. Because we did some book signings in bookstores, and they were super boring. For me, the most important part of inspiration and action, I've been a professional athlete. I've done commercials and films, and I do my own theater. I've written movies. I have to deal with Michael Douglas and other books and stuff I'm doing. The key for me is the inspiration part. I think most people, I can never fulfill on things that don't inspire me. And I adapt. It took me 10 years in Hollywood to figure out that I do one thing. I adapt. I adapt blogs. I adapt books. I could take anyone's life in here and make it into a movie. I know that. If you put me in a room right now and said, come up with the next Star Wars, I cannot do that. It sounds really exciting. I'd really like to do that because everyone likes to write Star Wars. I can't do that. And so the point for me is I can compete in my lane. And it was really important. It took me so long to find my lane and not be attracted to the shiny things. And being clear what checks I can cash. I cannot cash a check on Star Wars or TV, but I can adapt the shit out of a book. And I know it. And I'll compete with anyone in Hollywood in that lane. Pretty simple.
I've been self-employed since I was 17. I've spent most of my life failing. Dropped out of high school when I was 17. So I have a little bit different story than most of you. Started my 9th business 18 months ago. I'm happy to tell you with no investors, no debt, and the business grew 100x in revenue last year. I spent most of my career striving and chasing after an outcome. This has been my secret to sort of some pretty successful achievement, particularly recently. And that's been to allow the universe to serve me, as opposed to me chasing after what I was trying to find, right? So most of us spend most of our time striving and chasing and planning and having goals and trying to achieve things when everything we need to attract and to enjoy the abundance that we deserve is already within us. And we're so busy striving that we're pushing away that abundance. And the single greatest thing that happened to my life was following a major failure was the discovery of meditation. And what meditation did for me and what it will do for you is slow down the trauma of thinking. Neurologists speculate we have about 65,000 thoughts a day. The problem is most of those same thoughts we had yesterday, right? And most of those thoughts are about how we're not enough, regrets of our past, and anxieties of our future, right? As opposed to being present in the moment. And so for me, the practice of meditation allowed me to train my brain to be present here and now. And when we open up those channels of presence, we're able to be grateful and live a life of appreciation as opposed to expectation.
Hey!